Dear friends, honored guests, so we're ready for the second session of this afternoon. I think the stories in the documentary all left a very big impression on us, and it gives food for a lot of thought, and I also think it gives a lot of food for these panelists to talk about. We have 4 highly esteemed panelists with us today here. I'm so grateful for each one of them to be here with us today. They will each give a short presentation, and at the end there will be time for questions and answers for the audience. And I also have some questions if there's any time left. I would like to start by introducing Mr. Farid Haerinejad. Thank you so much. Mr. Haerinejad is a TV producer, a journalist, and a documentary filmmaker for over 20 years, including working as a staff member at the Canadian Broadcasting Company, the CBC, for over a decade. The central theme of his documentaries is about social justice and minority rights. Throughout his career, his accomplishments have been acknowledged internationally by awards and nominations from highly prestigious authorities in the field of cinema and television, including a nomination for the Gemini Awards from the Academy of Canadian Cinema and Television, the Silver World Medal Award from New York Film and Television Festivals, and Justice Award from Cinema for Peace in Berlin. We are very grateful for Mr. Haerinejad to be here present during the screening of this important documentary here in the Netherlands. Mr. Haerinejad, a warm welcome to you, and please, I give the microphone to you.
Thank you very much. I really don't have much to say. I think the film was self-explanatory. If there is any question, I'm here to answer, of course.
Then we will start with Ms. Tusscher. Ms. Tusscher is our new special envoy on religion or belief of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs here in the Netherlands. She has just started this position for the 1st of September, so very welcome to this new job. And she's the successor of Mr. Jos Dauma, who was the first person to hold that position. Ms. Tusscher's CV is too long to share here with you, but she has been active in diplomatic service since 1985, including serving as an ambassador in various places around the world. And in all her jobs, she's had a connection with human rights and international affairs. Her new position gives her the possibility to exert influence in the international community and to encourage freedom of religion and belief for all. And we know in the case of the Bahá'ís in Iran that the international community can actually have a big influence on the situation there on the ground. So I'm very happy to have Ms. Tusscher here, and please, the microphone is yours.
Thank you so much, Karlijn. It's a great pleasure and honor for me to be here with you today. And thanks to Farid, because he brought me back to a country that I grew to love, Iran. I visited Iran a few times in my work and also as a private person. And I was so impressed with the beauty of the country and its people and the richness. And this film, which touched me very deeply, as it must have touched all of you very deeply, it shows the reason for my new function, to be the special envoy for religion and belief. It just shows exactly, and it couldn't have been better, so thank you for that. It couldn't have been better illustrated what I want to do and what my predecessor, Jos Dauma, who many of you knew, and I'm a great friend of his and a great fan of yours, because his heart is in what he does and in protecting and promoting freedom of religion and belief. He took a stance, and that example I want to follow, because my heart is also here, in this case with you, but with all the religious minorities and also people who do not believe in a religion but have other convictions and are not safe, and they are not protected in their own being as a human being. And that was so well illustrated in this beautiful movie, that people should be free and they should be safe. That's all. And it's so basic. And that's exactly what we saw in this film, how people, normal people, it could have been me there, intellectuals, shopkeepers, people who sell beautiful things like flowers, just by being of a certain conviction, to be prosecuted or persecuted and then prosecuted with the wrong excuses of having committed crimes. It reminded me very much, and I was discussing this with Farid just now, of the Jews before the Second World War, how any feeble excuse was used to exclude them from normal life and to deny them their basic rights. And this beautiful girl who felt so lonely at school, it was heartrending that she couldn't find friends and she didn't understand why. And actually, I was brought back to my own youth in the Netherlands. I was just discussing this with an old friend of mine, and she lived in a very Catholic part of the country. And she had, there were only Catholics there, and in her class, a Protestant young girl came. And she was told by the teachers that she was not supposed to visit the girl at home. She was not supposed to be friends with her. So the girl felt very lonely. And fortunately, this was in the 50s, that stopped in the Netherlands. I also grew up in a society where these religions were compartmentalized, where you did not do your shopping in a shop which was owned, in my case, by a Protestant, because I was brought up Catholic as well. So it was not so long ago, actually, that we sometimes caused the same pain to children and to grown-ups in our society. But we have outgrown that. We got more enlightened, if you could call it that way. And that is what I see, and I see the hope in the Bahá'í community also, that the country will become free again, that things might change. And the last thing we should lose in life is hope. That's what I also learned from the Jewish people that are my friends. The last thing you should lose is hope. If you lose hope, you lose life. And many people were prepared to lose their lives for their convictions, for their religions. And that is what inspires me, and thank you for that, for this great film, that it gives me the reason for my job for the next few years, to work on the individual level with people who feel prosecuted for no reason, because they believe in something, to help protect them through international networks, international religious societies and groups, with my colleagues, international diplomats, with international organizations, and also by making known to leaders in countries that we have concerns. And that I do in very close touch with my great colleague, Bahia, who is here with us tonight, because she does the brunt of that work. I only take a very small section of what she's doing. It just shows how much work there is to do, isn't there, Bahia? And which we want to take on with the whole Ministry of Foreign Affairs, because I'm only a symbol. I'm only a representative. The rest of the ministry is supposed to become a religiously literate. That's another angle we want to give to promote, and that was also mentioned in the film, how religion can be used as a tool and as a weapon. And one of the people you interviewed, Farid, illustrated that very well. And we should all be aware of that and be able to counter these arguments. And the only last question I had, which will be answered by you, Mansoureh, is why leaders feel so threatened by certain religious groups. And that keeps intriguing me. And I'm really looking forward to part of the answer. Thank you.
Thank you so much for telling also your personal story and also looking forward to the years to come. And we're also really looking forward to that. Thank you. I will now introduce to you our next speaker, Ms. Mansoureh Shojaee. Those with an Iranian background will undoubtedly know Mansoureh. But for those who do not have an Iranian background, I will try to explain who she is. Mansoureh Shojaee is an activist, a researcher and writer in the field of women's and human rights, working inter alia on establishing libraries for women and children in deprived areas in Iran. She has been arrested and interrogated several times for her activities in Iran. Her house was repeatedly attacked by security forces, and she has been subjected to a 4-year travel ban. This ban on leaving the country was lifted by her lawyer, Nasrin Sotoudeh, allowing Ms. Shojaee to travel to Germany in 2010, where she received a scholarship from the German Pen Association. She's currently engaged in working as a researcher in the field of women with the Free University of Amsterdam, the Social Sciences Department, the VU, and also as a project manager in the Iranian Academy of Social Sciences. A warm welcome to you, dear Mansoureh, please.
Thank you to having me. Deeply impressed with this moving film. I will try to present a critical analysis, as you told, asking why such a civilized people like Bahá'í people targeted to state suppression. Why, after the Islamic Revolution, more than 200 Baha'is were executed and died in Iran's prison. The story had started at the beginning decades of the 13th century when Iran affected by the 2 wars with Russia and the incompetence of Qajar rulers. It was a very moment when some revolutionary movement started in Iran. The Bab movement was one of this revolutionary movement. Although this movement had a religious ideal, it had dimensions of social movement in its goals, specifically the principle of women's rights. Such a principle caused double courageous for Tahereh, who was one of the leaders of this movement, to remove the hijab and set foot on the path of women's freedom and emancipation. Bab himself was a young man when his innovative religion discourse about freedom and equality spread out with a progressive approach. This discourse caused shock and fear among 2 groups. First, the kings, second, the clergies. On the other hand, it attached a large circle of people who were suffering from the lack of freedom, justice, and fanaticism. This movement was not essentially seeker power, but at the time, with a society-oriented view, it was determined to build a world full of peace, justice, and freedom. But this peaceful ritual had seen as a dangerous act by the power-seeking and oppressive rulers. Consequently, it was forbidden by both the rulers and clergies. I want to say, since the constitutional era, the followers of the Bab and Baha'is have been suffering due to their opinion and religion. They always were used as a tool, as you said, as a tool to determine the political relationship between the rulers and the clergies as a hostage. After the Islamic Revolution, there was no more conflict about the hate speech and hate discourse to Baha'is among the rulers. But why was this group attacked more than other religious minorities? The main reason for such a terrified oppression are, first, the Baha'is' idea carries progressive message from the global peace. Second, the Baha'is' beliefs to equality between men and women in all aspects of the life. Therefore, Baha'is are pressed in several aspects because of their religion and because of their civil and social goals, which link them with the other civil social movement. This is very dangerous for Republic Islamic. Briefly, according to the news and also according to my personal experience, the ethical idealism, social commitment, and human rights behavior of the Baha'is in Iran are far publicly expressed by these Baha'i people. In Iran, they have the experience of living under an ideological religious state. For such a state, favoring the equality of men and women, favoring freedom of expression, favoring eliminating discriminative law are known as the activities against national security. But this accusation does not make fear the courageous Baha'is in Iran. Instead, they stand together with us, with the other civil movement players. This solidarity has increased, especially in the last 3 decades, because demand-oriented and society-oriented civil movement in Iran have grown significantly. They have no fear to be connected with social movement, especially with the women's movement, in order to achieve their own right. This courage is reminiscent of the behavior of Tahir. It sounds the Baha'i community inside Iran has deeply achieved a common sympathy with the non-Baha'i community in prison cells, in the corridors of Islamic revolutionary court, and in the displacement and deprivation in Iran. This common sympathy is especially feels among imprisoned Baha'i women, such as my lovely friends Mahvash Shahriari and Fariba Kamalabadi, and hundreds of Baha'i compatriots in Iran's prison. But let's be hopeful. This common sympathy could make common perspective of the social and civil struggle by us as the dissidents, including Baha'is, Muslims, Zoroastrian, Christianism, Judaism, and atheists, to establish a secular, democratic republic government based on the international human rights law. Let's be hopeful. Hope has 2 daughters, anger and courage. Anger against the phenomena as they are, and courageous for change them. Thank you.
Thank you, dear Mansoureh, for also enlightening us on what is happening in Iran between the women's movement and the Baha'is there, and seeing what will happen in the future. But we definitely have hope. Thank you so much. And now it is time to introduce to you our last panelist, Rachel Bayani. Thank you so much for joining us. Rachel works for Baha'i International Community, or BIC, for the Brussels office. Prior to joining the BIC, she worked as a Justice and Home Affairs Counselor for the permanent representation of Luxembourg to the EU, dealing mainly with asylum and minority issues. She also served in Bosnia-Herzegovina with the UN High Commissioner for Refugees and with the peacekeeping mission there. We are very happy to have her today in this panel too, and I hope that she will also tell us about what is happening to the Baha'is today in Iran, because there are so many new developments. Please, Rachel.
Thank you very much, Karlijn. But just to start to say that really I know the stories, I grew up with them, and just the way you've put them together is very, very powerful. So really thank you for this. And if you allow me, if I can, before I go to today's situation, if I can just quickly zoom back into the past. And really the reason I want to do that, because actually Mona that you saw referred to in the film, she was arrested exactly 40 years ago. She was arrested in October 40 years ago. And at the time you saw that she was 16 years old. They thought it would be short. Her arrest would be short because the only reason, or the reason she was being arrested, was because she was teaching sort of Baha'i classes to Baha'i children. But they were wrong. Together with Mona, there were 9 other women that were arrested. And really, they were all of them told 4 times that if they were to renounce their faith, they would be free. And if when at the end they didn't sign those papers, they received their death sentence. And the reason was spying for Israel. They were hanged, and we saw that on June 18, 1983. And the last one to be hanged was Mona. She was the youngest. And they thought if she sees one by one those 9 other women in front of her, she would succumb, but she didn't. And then she was asked one last time, will you renounce? She said no. I just want to say the age. So because that also, we see pictures there, but also just to hear the age of these women, I think is quite significant. So Mona was 16. Then we had 21, 23, 24, 25, 28, 29, 32, 56, and 57. And really, it just shows the resilience and the courage that resides in the young generation. And it's exactly that courage that is also reason for hope. And it's that same courage that we see today still very present in these young and older generations of Baha'is in Iran. Really, Baha'is have been persecuted since the inception of the faith in Iran, but it's only since the revolution that persecution has become very systematic, and it's become state policy as such. These persecutions are government-led, they're intentional, they're systematic, they seep from the highest level of authority down to the lowest, from the national to the communal. They're carried out and executed by all agencies and bodies of the state. And last but not least, they concern every area of human life. So basically, Baha'is are not only not allowed to practice their faith, they don't have other rights. They're not only not a religious minorities in the Constitution, they don't exist as a minority in the Constitution, they don't exist at all. And the evidence, and you saw the document, is black on white as a memorandum. It's a memorandum by a 91, dated 91, and it's signed by Ayatollah Khamenei. And really it says very clearly it sort of lays out intentions of the government, which is to eliminate the Baha'i community as a viable entity. And then it says, and then it sort of lays out how it will go about eliminating. By denying access to higher education, by denying access to public employment, by denying access to a whole wide range of other kinds of employments, and by just generally sort of instigating fear and despair. Now, today, 44 years into the revolution, Baha'is continue to be heavily persecuted. Now, while during these first sort of years, you saw they were being executed, of course, executions call for a lot of international attention. The government now is trying to slowly suffocate. And so it's changed its strategy a bit, because it's much harder to measure suffocation than it is to measure execution. However, suffocation and execution in the long run come down to very similar sort of things. They're now, and this is Baha'is being constantly and continuously arbitrarily arrested. There are now over 1,000 people, and at all times, who are awaiting their summons, about to be sort of imprisoned. And you can imagine the pressure that's on you when you can be pulled into prison at any time, and this is very intentional. Recently, a series of young adults with children, both husbands and wives, were arrested. Now, again, that kind of psychological pressure when you don't know what to do with your child. And I think the young man there in the movie described it very well. You know, that moment when both of his parents, one was he already executed and the other one was in prison, that limbo, and then the worry of those parents. Now, what they're facing in terms of charges is espionage, colonialism, threat against national security, insult to Islam, or corruption on earth. Now, on the economic front, so Baha'is are not allowed public employment. They're banned from private employment sectors, many of them. Their shops are systematically closed. Their land is confiscated and their homes demolished. Now, very recently, I think beginning of August, 200 sort of government agents. So also imagine the time Iran is in right now, you know, the situation, the pressure, the economic pressure, sort of that whole kind of ambiance that you have in the country. They have the sort of the time to send 200 government agents to a village called Roshankoh. It's in the northern part of Iran. And I've seen footage of that village. It's a small farming village. They sent 200 people there to demolish the homes of the Baha'is and seal off their properties. Now, again, in that footage that I saw, it was actually very interesting because you had this very, very elderly couple who were being interviewed, and the husband could barely hear. And the wife had to translate, not translate, but sort of sort of loudly say everything again into his ears. Is these people that been sort of accused of being spies? You know that probably this man has never come down the mountain, let alone travel to another country. They were also saying that their cows, this is a farming village, their cows were being separated because Baha'i-owned cows, Baha'i cows could not be with non-Baha'i cows. Now, so this is nothing new, but what is now new is that some of these proceeds are going to a parastatal organization called the Execution of Imam Khomeini's Order. So, which actually helps the government to enrich itself. So we saw Baha'i youth are denied education. Now imagine you can't access the kind of jobs that you can get when you're having university education, combine that with all of the other sectors and possibilities that are not yours. And now imagine this being the case in a country like Iran that is economically suffering. So your options are very, very little. I just want to conclude with saying that in the month of August alone, we've had more than 245 incidents of arrests and sort of destruction. Among the arrests were 13 youth, again in the northern province of Mazandaran. They were arrested, most of them, while they were in the home of one of them, discussing the role of education in social transformation. You know, the fear that you must have if you arrest a bunch of youth that are discussing the power of education. And what they are doing is exactly the same thing than these same sort of Baha'i youth are doing in the Netherlands, than they're really doing across the world, which is trying to see how they can dedicate their lives to the betterment of society, how they can live that, what they call a twofold moral purpose. One is to work on your own sort of betterment, and then through that also contribute to those around yourself. And so all the Baha'is are asking in Iran is to be able to express what they think is the most meaningful thing to do in life, which is that of being of service to others.
Thank you so much, Rachel, also for pointing out what is happening in Iran today, and also to hear what the Baha'is are actually simply trying to do, which is not spying for Israel, which would be a lot harder, actually, but really trying to help the others around us. And I'm very happy we've seen the documentary with all the stories about what happened to people in the 1980s and their families who are still suffering so much today. And we've heard from the government representative about the freedom of religion or belief in the world and how important it is for everyone, also in the Netherlands, but everywhere in the world, to have that right. And also to see what is happening with civil society in Iran, and how civil society and women in particular are working towards that goal of creating a better society. And also hearing about what the Baha'is are doing there and how they are suffering today and how the Iranian government is trying to suffocate this community. So thank you all very much. And I would like to ask the audience whether there are any questions. Fariba has a microphone, so if anyone has a question to any of the panelists, now is the time.
I think you can hear me like this. It's okay because this is not.
It's not working. Yeah.
I think
yeah.
Just for everyone for the live stream, it's necessary to talk into the
Okay,
microphone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Pejman Javdan, member of the National Assembly of the Baha'is of the Netherlands, and I want to ask a question from Mr. Haerinejad. First of all, thank you very much from the bottom of my heart for making such a documentary. When watching it, it brought me back to my own time and my own personal experience in Iran. And really, thank you very much. And I want to ask you, what motivated you? What is the reason actually for you to make such a documentary?
Thank you. First of all, thank you for this event. I think the best part of making a film is to having the opportunity to meet the audience, no matter how small or how big, but it's just great to be face to face, eye to eye, and talk. And that's, I think, is the purpose of making documentary films, to make sure there's a discussion going on. Why did I do this film? I heard a lot of news about Baha'i community, I have done a lot of work regarding other minorities, and but somehow I never paid attention to Baha'is or other religious groups in particular. But the news keep coming, so many people were arrested, so many people were, sentenced, so many people are waiting, this and that. But the stores are being closed, and because I really love, watching documentaries, I watched a lot of documentaries regarding Jews in Germany, and it reminded me so much, and we just had this talk, of the way Jews were treated in just marginalized just before the war and before the that tremendous very hateful Holocaust happened. And it was happening somehow, it was reminding me of that, the way Iranian Baha'is were treated. So I started to look around and read more, and I'm not Baha'i. I never thought I met Baha'is, but apparently I did. I just didn't ask. My friends, apparently, there were some Baha'is in, and the journey started there. Again, I didn't know much about them, and that's why I call it journey, because I started to understand the life and stories of people that otherwise you wouldn't say they're different from us, because they're not. They're just another human being, another fellow citizen living their lives, but so many obstacles doesn't give them the free fall that maybe I have, for example. So that was the start of it. So I contacted the Baha'i community. I asked questions, and they were very helpful in directing me to people, to find more people, to find more stories, and speak to the people themselves. So that's how it started. I just want to mention one thing. Before being accused of being Israel's spy, they were accused of being spies for Britain, and before that, Russia. So Israel is recent, thing. And so, and the other thing I want to add to a wonderful talk by my friend is that, in one word, the reason I feel that Iran is prosecuting Baha'i so harshly is that they see a big threat, political threat, because in Baha'ism, I don't want to say Baha'ism, in the faith of Baha'i, there is no priest. And the whole existence of the Iranian government is based on the priests. And if you take that job away, there's a big problem. So that was the point in there. So I just wanted to bring it up.
Thank you so much. Any further questions? Hans.
Thank you for organizing this. My name is Hans Noot, Gerard Noot Foundation and Human Rights Without Frontiers. I'm very happy to meet you all. And I think I now understand why we're in this room, because this is a secret spy thing, right? I guess it is, and the doors are probably locked.
It's underground.
It's underground, and we're in a safe. Yeah, I get it. So I'm an anthropologist as well, and I look at, and a strategist, so I look at global strategy, and I'm really interested in why do people do what they do? And as a consequence, I'm really, really interested in looking at what's happening here. And thank you so much for being so open and transparent about this all, which is, I think, necessary for a good, wholesome community here in the Netherlands that we're trying to raise. The question I have, particularly for our politicians in the group here, Bea, if I can ask you specifically, we're looking at making this renown worldwide. Hopefully, this will be this documentary and the things that are going on in Iran. And I realize from a political point of view, relationships between, in this case, the Netherlands and Iran are very difficult, to say the least, right? It is difficult to walk the line. What would be a healthy or helpful strategy for, say, a Dutch government, a Ministry of Foreign Affairs, to help them in their work with Iran, particularly helping not just the Bahá'í, but Christians and all of those who are being persecuted? Is that a clear question? Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Hans. It's a very good question, and I'm sure Bahia is willing to help me here. She's doing this every day, but I've been doing it also, this work you now describe, how to raise this to a government. And that requires a certain strategy of balancing it, of not looking for the media. That's why you don't find me so much on the social media, because it sometimes destroys our credibility with governments. What I always did, and I raised not the Bahá'í specifically, but many minorities' concerns, always by basing myself on the international treaties that these governments mostly have signed up to, even Iran, the International Covenant for political and economic rights, for civil and political rights, and also the other treaties that they've signed. But this is a more legal approach. The other approach is the economic approach, which I learned when I was head of the the Women and Development section. There was a report published by the World Bank, which pointed out the vital economic contribution of women and how much it would cost to leave them out of society, to marginalize them. It cost a great deal. And that can be quantified also, which the World Bank did. The World Bank did in 2000. And that argument, that utilitarian argument, which is almost a curse in certain circles, because you're supposed to only defend the moral high ground, to take the moral high ground. If you take this more pragmatic, very Dutch approach of how much does it cost you as a country to persecute all these people, and these people who can make a vital contribution, especially because they focus so much in the case of Bahá'í on education and on bettering themselves and bettering their environment. How much more valuable citizens do you want? And then by also pointing out these aspects, that sometimes gives you a certain credibility. Also by showing that you appreciate certain things that governments do, which is not so easy sometimes to find. You really need a magnifying glass, but there's always something. The glass is always half full and never half empty. So I always like to stress. It creates a certain, relationship, and that is what you want. And then you can raise certain things, you can hammer down certain things, but in the case of Iran, I'm at a loss. So Bahia, maybe you have other elements of your strategy you'd like to add?
Yeah, thank you, Bea. And building on what my colleague Bea just said, I think one thing that we can add, first of all, it's good to have a toolbox with a whole array of tools, and each time to see which one is most effective in relation to a certain country, and there's no one size fits all. But building on what Bea said, I think one thing that we also do is to really try and seek, when we want to speak out, seek the support of other countries. That's why we work in coalitions. For instance, Bea works in the International Association of Freedom of Religion and Belief, but there are also all other coalitions, and of course the European Union and the UN, because when you speak together, you unify your voice and you have more impact than having one voice speaking out. So that's something that we work very hard with like-minded countries and partners.
And that takes often a lot of time, but that is ultimately, I think, very effective. So that's also something we do on a daily basis. But as we all know, and as has been emphasized, has been going on for decades. But we still have hope, and we believe that sooner or later it will change. And that's why also not only the voice of governments are very important, but also of NGOs and civil society organizations, and also of parliamentarians, I would like to add. So I think each stakeholder in society has their role to play, and that's the only way things can change. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bahá'í and Tazib, for adding that. I think we've come to the end of this session. I think, Salome, you're the last.
Thank you so much. My English is not very good, so please forgive me. And I'm very emotional, so it even makes it worse. And I was really so touched, and it was so emotional for me. Thank you so much for your beautiful documentary. I was very touched because my whole family they have really suffered for 43 years, 44 years. They have been arrested for 5, 6, 7 years. One of them was executed. And so our house was burned up many times on fire. So, and then at last, the young Baha'is in Mazandaran, one of them is my nephew. He's now free, but as you know all, they had to put a certificate of a house so he can be called any moment. And the things that he has told me, how harsh they have really been to him and what they did to him, it really breaks your heart. So I just wanted to share it with you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's very touching. I just want to add something here. The reason, and it was mentioned, the reason executions don't happen at this stage was the international pressure. And so it's very important, the job that you are doing and governments, especially in the Western side, is doing. I have done some advocacy work, so I know sometimes politicians don't really know what are the problems or issues are. And Iranian government is getting better in convincingly lying and giving wrong information. So one of my hopes and my other documentaries, and I know there are, besides this documentary, other people that are making film, is that for them to look and educate themselves about the issues and what NGOs and other venues, it's possible, NGOs and activists can do, probably just to educate not only the ordinary citizens, but also the politicians, the ones that do the negotiations, the ones that have to, understand what's going on. And after that, the change comes easily because they know what they're really dealing with and how the best they can, solve the problem. Again, thank you very much for coming and inviting me.
Before ending, I want to say about 2 points. The first point is that the last phrase I mentioned out, it's from Saint Augustine. Saint Augustine said, hope has 2 daughters, anger and courageous. And let's be hopeful with 2 daughters and go forward. This is the first I had to say. And the second point is that, thank you, Farid. Thank you, because we saw several films about the Baha'i community in Iran, as well as from Mazir Bahari, Borkhaja 3 years ago. Do you remember? It was before COVID. We watched it together. But the challenge you show, it's the challenge between parents and new generation and the child. We are mother, most of all are mothers. And this is a common challenge for us. If we did the best for our child or not? And this is the question we, by help of Marha and Maya and Ali Fotobati from Zamone, we made a collection from Evin with Love. And it is exhibiting in 14th of October in ISS, Institute of Social Study, and on occasion of 70 years anniversary of this university. And they invited us to show this. And on that exhibition, you can see a lot of mothers handmade, which made during the imprisonment. They made something for their child to show them they are still mother, but they are not mother of their own children. They are the global mother. Please join us to be connected with these global mothers, including Mahvash, Fariba, Shojaee, Afarin, and a lot of dissidents. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. We've come to the end of this session. Farid Haerinejad, thank you so much for this documentary, for giving a voice to people who don't have a voice, and also for documenting this part of history. Fariba, please. Yes, of course. And also the other speakers, of course, thank you so much for joining us tonight. And also, I would like to take this opportunity to thank Radio Zamane for helping us stream this event live. They really worked hard on this very, very last moment, which was all our fault. So thank you so much, also Ali. Fariba is a bit behind. I'm sorry.
I'm not behind, you're too fast.
Thank you so much.
For you and your colleagues.
Yes, for the whole Zamana media, which has been really helpful. Thank you. I would like to end this with a quote from the Universal House of Justice, which is the main governing body of the Baha'i faith. In a recent letter they addressed to the Baha'is of Iran. Beloved friends, in the midst of these events, bring hope to your countrymen's hearts. Be a source of consolation to every burdened soul and of confidence to every weary heart. Care sincerely for everyone and bring solace to every helpless one. Heal the pains of others and thereby ease your own pain. And before Almighty God, ask forgiveness for those who commit iniquity against you, and pray fervently that the dross of prejudice and ignorance may be cleansed from their hearts. Thank you so much for joining us today, and I would like to invite you all to the reception, which will take place outside, and we can all talk about the documentary and other things and enjoy a small bite and a drink. Thank you so much, everyone.